So good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. So you may be wondering why I am saying this way, because we have friends, participants who are getting up early morning at 5 o'clock in California, Canada, then around 10 o'clock from Brazil. Then also we have in European time around 3 o'clock. And we also have 6:30, you know, most of us from India. We also have friends from Thailand, Indonesia. So who are also, I think Indonesia is almost 8 o'clock. So maybe also from Australia and other places. So it is a wide spectrum from 5 a.m. till 10:30. So this is showing that, you know, we are from different time space, from geographical spaces, and belonging to the whole universe. So this is a kind of a screen, global screen, and extremely happy to welcome all of you. So we were, as everybody knows very well, that we are all suffering because of this COVID corona, and we are taking this opportunity to come together with the science and technology. Unfortunately, the science and technology is unable to give a solution to our difficulties. A very small corona virus have confined us our own rooms. So therefore, I think that this would be a great occasion for us to think about suffering, and two religious traditions, you know very well, that, you know, are speaking about or thinking about from 500 BC, then also the 1st century, about suffering from the Buddhist perspective, that is Lord Buddha and also Christ Jesus. So both of them were thinking about, and through their suffering, and they were also giving us meaning. What is the meaning of suffering? So from the Buddhist perspective and also from the Christian perspective, we were all coming together on this screen, and this is the 11th conference, and each time there were two scholars, and we have not only the religious leaders, monks, professors, neuromedical scholars, and ordinary people as well. They were giving lectures. There were almost 25 scholars who have discussions in this, and then many other important people were also giving us as service as moderators. So today we have a great two important.
Father Matthew is bishop is there already. Is there?
I have seen him, so
Okay,
I will welcome him. Thank you. So so we have already two great religious leaders. We have Geshe Lhakdor, and also His Grace. We have Sharma Nithiyanandham from Vellore Diocese. And today we have also the as moderator, the Bishop of Vasai, Right Reverend Dr. Thomas Dabre. He's a great theologian and scholar and speaker, professor, and many things. And His Grace was ordained in 1971 as a Catholic priest, and in 1990 consecrated as an auxiliary bishop of Mumbai, and became the bishop of Vasai in 1998, and 2009 bishop of Pune. So His Grace Bishop Thomas Dabre has written his thesis, doctoral thesis, The God Experience of Tukaram, a study in religious symbolism, from JDV Pune. So this His Grace would be the most prominent person to have as a moderator here. So in the name of all this August Assembly, I welcome Bishop Thomas Dabre. Bishop Thomas Dabre is part of the dialogue commission or a dialogue office of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, as well as the Pontifical Council for Interfaith Dialogue and Ecumenism in Rome. So most welcome, Your Grace, Bishop Thomas Dabre, and please take over as the moderator, and please introduce, and then we will have the last session on suffering from the Buddhist and Christian perspective. We were having for almost 3 months this interfaith dialogue on suffering. Thank you. Over to Bishop Thomas Dabre.
So thank you very much, Brother Matthew. And thank you also for our live via our main organizer, that is Father Joby, who is the Secretary of the Commission for Interreligious Dialogue for India. It's a great pleasure for me, friends, a great pleasure to be part of this webinar. And this webinar will be on the topic of suffering. We are all experiencing suffering. But the question to be asked is how we handle the suffering, how we face up to suffering, and what is, so to say, our disposition towards suffering. So these are matters of concern, and every human being who experiences willy-nilly suffering in his life must learn to cope with suffering and find a proper approach to suffering. Therefore, this is, I can say, an all-important topic, and we shall be guided to discuss this and to cope with this problem of suffering. First, I invite Reverend Geshe Lhakdor. He is the Director of Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. He is based in Dharamshala in India. So please may I invite our beloved friend, scholar, and a great Buddhist leader, Reverend Lhakdor. So you have now the mic in your hand.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. So
We are able to hear.
first of all, I would like to greet the learned speakers and thank the organizers, and also welcome all the listeners and participants from different places. It's a great honor for me to meet all of you and speak to you on the topic of suffering from Buddhist perspective.
And we'll be very happy to know, sir, how long you will be speaking.
Yes, 30 minutes, because that was the time given to me. I'm trying to be a disciplined person.
Very good. That is shown from your bearing. So in your hands.
Yes. Sure. So I will try to speak not more than 30 minutes, because speaking is important, but it is easy. Practice is difficult. So I'll try to speak less. And so this topic, no doubt, is very important. And since you have been doing this for the last few months, I'm sure you've already educated and helped many people. And but still, I will try to put some of my little understanding. So first of all, I want to put a question mark on this, on the usage of this word suffering, which the Buddhists have been using these days. In the English translation, we have been using this word suffering repeatedly, and it seems that our Christian friends also are using this word suffering. But on closer scrutiny, it looks like that the word suffering actually may be not very appropriate, because I think it is more appropriate to use the word kind of dissatisfaction that we have in our life. Suffering is more manifest and obvious. So many people may not experience that kind of obvious suffering, but still there may be a lot of dissatisfaction in their life. And so let me, whether it's, the word dissatisfaction or suffering, whichever word you use, but I want to play with this, this Hindi word as the counterpart for the word suffering, which is dukha. And we use these two words, sukh and dukh. And these two words actually come from the combination of two letters, sukha, dukha. And I'm sure many of you are already enlightened on this. The word dukha, du means bad, ka means whole, so bad whole. Su means good, ka means whole, so sukha means good whole. So that Hindi terms came into originated by giving the explanation of chariot when it pulls the wheels. Then if the axle of that wheel is smooth, then the wheel also goes very smoothly, because that hole for that axle is good, for good hole. And on the other hand, if that hole is rusty and blocked with so many other things, then it will be very difficult for the horse to pull that carriage. So similarly, sukha and dukkha, which basically means that if you have certain ways of thinking, and your life will go very smoothly. If you have certain negative ways of thinking, then despite your trying your best, the life will not go very smoothly. So I think this really gives a very beautiful explanation if you go to the root terms of the word sukha and dukkha. And realizing the importance of understanding the dukkha before we talk about sukha, the Buddha, after getting enlightened, the first teaching that he gave was on suffering, because the first teaching that he gave was on the Four Noble Truths, out of which the first truth that he spoke was truth of the suffering. And if you really want to have happiness, then you should be free from all the obstacles and hurdles which create dissatisfaction or suffering. So therefore, it is important to know that suffering. Now, this is important because majority of us in our ordinary life, we don't even know what is suffering. We know in cases where we think we know a little bit of suffering, we are talking only about superficial sufferings. Like when you get headache, then it is suffering. When you get a stomach ache, that is suffering. When you fall and have an accident, then it's suffering. But when these very obvious physical problems are not there, then you tend to forget that your life is okay. And you make friendship with okay. But it's actually not okay. Because if you look at your life properly, especially your psychophysical aggregate, the psychophysical aggregate, the nature of the psychophysical aggregate is such. Now, for example, if you look at your body is not made of diamond.
Is that mic is muted?
Yes, we are not able to hear.
I think he lost his signal.
He lost his internet connection.
I can hear now what you are saying. Some of you I can hear clearly.
Maybe network problem there in Dharamshala.
I can hear some of you very clearly.
Yeah, it's very clear.
It's okay.
Okay.
So, okay, so go ahead, please, sir.
Bishop is currently dropped out from the meeting. He will join back once he gets his internet connection.
Who's going to drop out?
The speaker just dropped out due to poor internet connection. He will come back.
Okay, so anyhow, let us not waste our time because important persons are there, I see on the screen. So at least for a while you heard what he has said. And our next speaker, the bishop also, the retired bishop also should be ready therefore. We have to make all these adjustments when this dukkha is there, when this suffering is there, let us make our adjustments and find our solutions. So maybe you heard what he was saying about dukkha. He called it dissatisfaction. And he was also saying that one of the Four Noble Truths is how to free ourselves from suffering. So that is where he was trying to remove all obstacles, all hurdles on our path. So this is what he said with regard to the Buddhist perspective. So now let us carry on until he appears on the screen. Father Joby, Father Cherry and Father Matthew can help us. So time is not wasted because that is a dukkha for me. To waste time is a dukkha.
So sorry.
You can go on
Yes,
speaking.
come back. Yes, come back.
Yeah, I will continue.
Yes, please, sir.
Please. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the light went out.
Oh dear.
So we have to suffer because we are talking about suffering. So what I was saying was that realizing the importance of understanding suffering, that the first teaching that the Buddha gave us on suffering. And here what we need to understand is to really closely look at the psychophysical aggregate. If we look at our own body, it is not made of diamond or even stone, and it is very fragile with slight changes in weather, with slight changes of food.
We've lost him again.
It is not possible. Again.
Yes, Your Grace, maybe Bishop Sharma, I think, can speak, and then afterwards we will.
Okay, so that is good. So if Bishop Sharma is ready, please may I invite you, dear Bishop Henry Sharma, the retired Bishop of the Church of South India.
No.
So,
He's not a
sorry,
retired bishop.
he's the Bishop of
present
Vellore.
Bishop of Vellore
I
Diocese.
got that thing retired. Sorry, sir. So anyhow, the present very active and dynamic Bishop of the CSI Diocese of Vellore.
He's the
Bishop, most
youngest
welcome.
bishop.
Sorry?
He's the youngest bishop among the CSA bishops.
Congratulations, sir. Congratulations. God always chooses the youngest to mention David in the first place, youngest. So you are a Benjamin and a David among us. The mic is yours. The mic is yours, sir.
Thank you, Bishop. Moderator Bishop Thomas, respected Geshe, Lhakdor, Buddhist sage, my beloved brother, Director ECC Father Matthew, and my friends. Especially I want to recognize my gurus are there. Dr. Jayagaran Isaac, my mentor. I could see Bennett Anna, my leader, my teacher Jnanavaram Anna, and my own family members are there. So I greet on behalf of Vellore Diocese. At the very outset, I want to thank Father Matthew for giving me an opportunity to interact, to share my views, to present a very important topic, suffering, in today's context. I'm going to share my reflections on overcoming suffering together. We need to come together and overcome suffering. Suffering, the only constant in our shifting world. Everything is changing. The suffering is very constant. Current COVID-19 pandemic has unleashed rampant suffering on many across the globe. I need not tell many things about that. Though not everyone has been infected by the virus, several among us have been affected in one way or other. Besides taking enormous lives, the pandemic is also upset the whole life and livelihood of many, especially the vulnerable and marginalized communities, migrants, women, daily coolies, vegetable vendors, so on. Added to this global pandemic, we have also seen instances of other forms of suffering. A few examples I would like to give. The murder of George Floyd in the US, the brutal attack of Indian soldiers at India-China border, Satankulam, father and son were murdered. Increase in the count of people committing suicide due to depression, death the beloved ones. One cannot forget to mention the deaths of several hundreds every day due to access to food. You know, that is a big question. People are dying every day. Safe drinking water. There is no safe drinking water. Gender-based violence. In a context like this, it seems as if the only constant in our world is suffering. It is in these contexts that I offer my reflections on human suffering. The Janus phase of suffering. Janus is Roman god, you all know that. It is universal and particular. Suffering is one of the great and tragic universals of human life. It is manifested in different forms and to different extent. Broadly speaking, no one is immune from suffering. Suffering can strike anyone at any time, no matter if he or she is rich or poor, old or young, strong or weak, good or wicked. However, despite its universality, it also has a particularity. Certain people can be more prone to suffering because of underlying factors. Some people undergo suffering due to their economic status, poverty. In India, poverty in the midst of plenty, it's a big question. Some due to regional violence. For example, Syria. Some are prone to abuse because of their low status in societal structures. Women and children are vulnerable. Some undergo suffering on the basis of their ill health and physical disabilities, and others due to emotional health. Therefore, when engaging with the question of suffering, one needs to bear in mind both universal as well as particular understanding of suffering. Like the two-faced Roman god Janus, suffering has a dual dimension, universality and particular. Understanding suffering, my friend Buddhist sage was telling this. He used a very good word, dissatisfaction. When you understand this suffering, etymologically speaking, the word suffering is derived from the Latin word suffere. This word has two roots, sub plus fere. Sub, which means under, inferior, like subcontinent, subordinate, etc. Fere means to carry, bear, essentially meaning to undergo or endure. The dictionary definition says the bearing of affliction and pain and loss, but suffering is more multi-layered. On the whole, suffering has an existential dimension that includes loss or impairment of inner harmony and of meaning and purpose of life. Therefore, suffering in most cases is incommensurate because of its personal nature. Being a student of theology, I would like to understand suffering theologically. The nature of and reason for human suffering have been subject of scholarly writings for millennia. Everywhere you can see that. Now and then, every time we get a lot of articles on suffering, theological articles. Understanding suffering and engaging with it has been at the heart of many of our faith traditions. The philosophical quest for an answer to the problem of suffering is universal, and it has to be acknowledged that it is one of the most difficult theological concepts to get a handle on. It's very difficult to handle on. I just would like to put an important issue here. The difficult issue of theodicy. Why do the innocent suffer? That is a big question, everywhere it has been raised. The difficult issue of theodicy. Why do the innocent suffer? Of all the difficult questions associated with suffering, the question of suffering of the innocent, unmerited suffering, which is often related to the question of theodicy, vindication of God. Answer to the question, why a good God permits the manifestation of evil, thus resolving the issue of problem of evil. That is a big question. Theodicy concerns how we indicate divine power and divine love in the face of the existence of evil and suffering. The primary question asked is, if God is good and powerful, why do the innocent suffer? Therefore, suffering is a theme which often leads to many struggles. More often so in a world that finds it easy to get angry at God. Sometimes even I get angry. These struggles prevail even among Christians. Many important questions can be asked about suffering here. Why do people suffer? How is suffering experienced, perceived, and processed by individuals? What shapes our individual response to suffering? Does faith play a role in overcoming suffering? These are some of the important questions that we need to struggle with. At this point, it may be useful to explore what the Christian traditions, scriptural traditions, has to say on human suffering. I think we need to go back to the scriptural tradition. Christian understanding of suffering. Although all of creation can and does suffer the effects of evil, human suffering is unique in the Christian perspective. It is clear from the book of Genesis that human beings, not God, introduce suffering into the created order through sin. Humanity's collective refusal to honor God as the source of existence. Yet for Christians, the solution to the problem of sin and evil is offered through the symbol of suffering, the cross. The cross of Christ stands out in the Christian tradition as the primary symbol both of love and of suffering. And we need to understand this. Their conjunction as well as their opposition. Therefore, suffering in the Christian tradition has to be understood holding these two dimensions in balance, of love, of suffering. In the Old Testament, suffering is often interpreted as divine punishment. The one who sins is cut off from God's protection or becomes the victim of divine sanction. Yet this portion, characteristics of the prophets and the so-called Deuteronomist, is not the last word on suffering. If you go to the wisdom tradition, particularly in the topic of Job, wrestles with the problem of suffering and God's covenantal love. Job as well as other wisdom texts repudiate the prophetic account of suffering. Yet there is no simple answer offered. Suffering remains a mystery. Although suffering of the righteous can become the means by which the sins of the people are removed. For an example, you can go to the book of Isaiah, suffering servant. Isaiah 52, 53 talks about this. In the New Testament, Jesus' suffering remains as a sign of world's opposition to God, but also serves as a paradoxical sign of discipleship and the means by which sin and evil will be conquered. Suffering thus plays an important role in moral formation of the disciples. James chapter 1 verse 2 to 4 and then Hebrews 12 talks about this, while also providing a witness to the power of God's love. The synoptic gospels, if you come to the synoptic gospel, Matthew, Mark and Luke are most insistent on this point. The importance that the Lord gives to this call and its embraces are inescapable. After St. Peter's confession at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus proceeded to inform his disciples that suffering would be part of their lives. Also, if they intended to be his followers, there is a condition. Jesus then said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, let that person deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. This suffering theme and its embrace occur repeatedly in the synoptics and are expressed in much same fashion from gospel to gospel. You can go through that. The call to follow Christ in suffering is most evident in the writings of St. Paul and in the witness of the early Christians. The underlying theme of the whole New Testament is the common belief, namely, the risen Christ, the Lord, is the suffering servant, proclaimed by the prophets of old, who suffered and rose from the dead, so that all might follow him in dying to this world, to self, in rising to a new life, union with him. When you come to theme of St. Peter's first sermon, the words of Christ in the synoptic gospels, the writings of St. Paul, almost all stress the same conclusion, that suffering is essential to the occasion of the follower of Christ, and that it will be willingly accepted by the follower. In the book of Isaiah, Christ is described as the suffering servant who suffered in a totally voluntary way. He was oppressed, he was affected, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. It was just quiet. The book of Job gives no answer to the why of suffering. That was not God's purpose also. No, it was not God's purpose. God just wanted to show that suffering is not necessarily the result of one sin. In other words, the innocent can suffer. Here again, I would like to pose a question. Can suffering be meaningful? Among philosophers and thinkers, one of the most important concerns have been to make meaning out of suffering. According to the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he says, I quote, suffering is the only thing that bestows value upon the world. Without pain and misery, life would be absurd and worthless. Here we learn from him, to live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Another great thinker and philosopher, leader, C.S. Lewis, also tried to be realistic in the face of suffering and affirms that to be human beings necessarily involves partaking in suffering. This is something great. He goes on to say how the Bible itself affirms that, quote, Blessed are they that mourn. His understanding of the reality of suffering is in line with the thinking of John Chrysostom, another saintly person, who says, if there were no tribulation, there would be no rest. In a poetic form, he says, if there were no winter, there would be no summer. There are others who have been seen suffering as the crucible for the cultivation of character. There are few who really advocate for this. According to Helen Keller, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. Similarly, Ignatius regarded his suffering as the culmination of his becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ. It's another very interesting regard. By sharing in the suffering and death of Jesus Christ, he hoped to share in his resurrection. That is his ultimate faith. According to John Wesley, the readiest way to escape from our suffering is to be willing to endure them for as long as God pleases. These responses clearly were aimed at being resilient in the face of reality of suffering and handling control over to God over suffering. This does not mean fatalistic resignation in the face of suffering. Rather, it means trusting in God and continuing to live in the light of God's love, even as one sought to reflect the love even in the midst of challenges and threats. It was about retaining one's hope in God in the midst of suffering, which emboldened people to even challenge powers and empires, even when threatened with torture and death. How can we respond to suffering? This is another question that we need to raise when we talk about suffering. Suffering leads to compassion and solidarity. Suffering leads to compassion and solidarity. Suffering is something that touches us both inwardly, affecting the depth of human existence, as well as outwardly, relating to our understanding of God, in whom we put our trust and hope, inwardly and outwardly. Part of this outwardly dimension of suffering is also related to the suffering of our fellow human beings and shapes human empathy and solidarity. Here we need to emphasize. Because of this dual dimension, suffering encompasses a wide range of emotions ranging from pain, pathos, pity, and piety. Sometimes this outward dimension of suffering, which is connected with understanding suffering in the light of their understanding of God, has led to profound theological and philosophical insights. On the other hand, the inward dimension has shaped practice of solidarity and compassion. As we cope with the struggles in our own lives and witness other people's struggles unfold in the news, a common response is to search for an underlying significance that might make our devastation more bearable. We all know what it is to feel pain and loss, whether from the loss of a loved ones, or a cancer diagnosis, or a natural disaster. Everyone experiences suffering. The outward and inward nature of suffering also coincides with the universal and the particular dimensions of suffering, and challenge Christians to adopt various approaches to suffering. The universal and inward nature of suffering can challenge us to become more compassionate and empathetic towards others. This is because we can momentarily pass over to the experience of the other and stand in their shoes. However, the outward and particular nature of suffering challenges us to embrace solidarity, especially with those who suffer unduly due to unjust systems and exploitative structures, in the lights of God's own solidarity with us through Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. Here I would like to bring another theologian, the Latin American liberation theologian, Leonardo Boff, calls this solidarity as compassion, comradely passion, where we actively accompany the other in the struggle to overcome suffering. I think walking extra mile. It is not passive, but active suffering. In the resistance of all that denies life in all its abundance. It is following Jesus Christ, who was crucified outside the city gates and shared the insult of those who are made to suffer outside the borders of power. It involves cultivating, another theologian, a great theologian, what Koseke Koyama long ago called a crucified mind, not a crusading mind, which inflicts suffering on others. The Christian takes strength and comfort in the fact that God suffers with us and even enters into our suffering, particularly in the person of Jesus of Nazareth on the shameful, humiliating cross. This is the accomplishment of the cross, to identify completely with and to accompany those who suffer. What Jesus accomplished on the cross is not just an action of the past. This enactment is being carried out through our lives, even when we pass through the darkest valley of life. We should not fear, because we are assured the abiding presence and accompaniment of God. That is the whole crux in it. Because we are now discussing about interreligious, I would like to throw some more point on the interreligious dimension, overcoming suffering towards, this is another area in which we need to focus. The interreligious dimension, overcoming sufferings towards boundless compassion and borderless solidarity. I think this is very important. We need to deal more on this particular concept. When we speak about compassion and solidarity, we need to understand that it is important for us to work towards overcoming suffering in partnership with brothers and sisters from other faiths. We need to work together. In our multi-religious world, we cannot overcome suffering on our own. Inclusive, we need to work together. We need to build alliance and partnerships for furthering life, enhancing life. As Christians, it is paramount that we both cultivate boundless compassion and borderless solidarity. By boundless compassion, we mean the compassionate love of Jesus. That is what I mean. The compassionate love of Jesus that we extend to anyone, irrespective of caste, creed, or religion. By borderless solidarity, it means the ability to work with people of other faiths to overcome suffering. I think Father Matthew and others must take it seriously. I think we need to work together, work with people of other faiths to overcome suffering. This is called, I just mentioned this is called shoulder-to-shoulder dialogue. Shoulder-to-shoulder dialogue. Or what is called dialogue of hands, where we engage in compassionate service, working hand in hand. Shoulder-to-shoulder dialogue. dialogue of the hands. I think we need to break the barriers, go beyond the boundaries. Many of our neighbors from other faiths have their own teaching on overcoming suffering. And it would be important to learn from each other. That is very important. We need to learn from others. I think we are not having that kind of an habit. All these different traditions also talk about being compassionate to others, especially the one who is less fortunate than us. Any response to suffering must be a response that connects people at the deepest level of their being. In the profound suffering, we need one another.
Please may I
Human
say to the
contact.
bishop, please may I say to the bishop that we are already completing half an hour for you.
Yeah. Shall I just take 5 minutes?
Yes, I have no difficulty.
Okay, I'll just take 5 minutes. I just would like to mention few important things. Islam also teaches the faithful to work actively to alleviate the suffering of others. Recognizing that they are the cause of their own suffering, individuals work to bring suffering to an end. Hindu tradition and practices presupposes the mechanism of karma, action, that one's action in earlier lives affect both one's rebirth and the events that are to occur in one's future lives. Suffering is thus inextricably linked to the consequences of actions. In this way, samsara is unavoidably pervaded by some degree of sufferings. They use this doctrine of karma, samsara, to free themselves from resorting to wicked action that can heighten the suffering of others. The question of suffering is a key concern for Buddhist. Buddha Sakyamuni has been quoted as saying, "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering." The overcoming of suffering is the key for Buddhism. The teaching of the Buddha are a strong reminder of our common responsibility to overcome suffering, by which you are being bound by our common humanity and sharing a common home, the earth. We are also drawn into a common responsibility, which ensures the wholeness and flourishing of the entire creation through overcoming all forms of suffering. We need to recognize that our shared humanity is both a response to the suffering and an impetus for solidarity and social action. There is a lot that we as people of other faiths and no faith and goodwill can achieve together if we join hands and work and walk together. In a world where the fear of the other seems to be on the rise, posing threats for hospitable and harmonious living, we draw confidence and courage from depths of religious traditions, reminding ourselves that hatred is never appeased by hatred, and that we need to become neighbors to the other. The Gospel of Luke. We need to become neighbors to the other. In the spirit of neighborhoodliness and in our steadfast commitment to overcoming suffering, let us commit ourselves to be co-pilgrims in the path of justice and peace. Dear brothers and sisters, let us today build on our commonalities. Find out what are the commonalities. Build our commonalities and foster a world which is marked by the flourishing of life for all by cultivating both boundless compassion and borderless solidarity. These two elements can be the stepping stones towards making this suffering world a better place to live, not just for some, but for all. Thank you very much. God bless.
So we thank with an applause, dear Bishop Sharma. Bishop, you have given a very learned and a very well-studied discourse on suffering, and it is quite extensive and quite comprehensive. You have given quite adequately the Christian view of suffering, covering the Old Testament, the Gospels, and the letters of St. Paul. And then you moved on to the philosophers and their analysis of suffering. You also came to modern philosophers, and then you referred to the modern theologians. And finally, you are concluding saying there are many proposals, how we should live in our common experience of suffering. And you have highlighted borderless. That is a very important insight. Borderless compassion, borderless solidarity, and you have also highlighted the interreligious dimension of suffering. But your final conclusion is that from the Christian perspective, the solution is given by Jesus Christ to realistically accept all suffering, realistically invites his disciples to pay the cost of suffering, to be ready to suffer, and through acceptance of suffering, of course, you also have said we have to fight suffering, we have to oppose exploitation, but in union with the risen Lord, if we go through our suffering, we also will share in his resurrection, and the resurrection of Jesus is the final triumph over suffering. There are many other insights, there are many other excellent points, what are the philosophical objections, etc. But this is an interactive session. So I throw it open before the Reverend Buddhist comes on the scene. If some of you want to interact, ask questions, highlight what you like, this is the time for you to react. Friends.
Thank you, Bishop. His Grace.
Bishop J, I think Galaxy J6, please unmute yourself and ask question. Galaxy J6. Unmute yourself and ask question. We can't hear you. Unmute yourself or we will go to the next one. Yes, please ask.
Otherwise, you say anybody wants to speak. It is better, I think. Anybody is able to speak, unmute and speak. Anybody?
Yes, John Madhyaragan, please
Yeah, go ahead,
unmute
sir.
yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I heard him.
Okay, sir.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Or anybody who can speak. Anybody. Because we have the limits of technology here in India.
I think they will. I will ask Your Grace. Thank you so much for this wonderful, erudite, scholarly presentation, quoting from many scholars, theologians, and we know that you are a most pastoral person, and you are calling all of us to work together in partnership with the other faith, and this is a part of the process. My question is that, Your Grace, do you have any suggestions? And then we will be able to follow such suggestions. Maybe, you are a leader of the Church of South India, and we can also have with the Catholic Church, and then we have the great leaders from the Buddhist tradition. So some of the ways and means of working together in partnership, overcoming our own limitations, so that we can have a boundless community.
Father, and thank you for that, clarifications or questions. See, we have multiple groups. All must be brought together to fight it. And the context is very clear. It is damaged, violent, broken, wounded, divisive. Here I would like to stress, compassion needs to be activated. All must be brought together then only it will be, possible for us to overcome this. We must put everything into practice, action, bring the groups and like-minded people. That's why, I'm saying that I think there are multiple groups thinking in that line, bring together, alliance building. Those things will definitely help us to overcome, us to fight against, to build solidarity. It's something like networking. It is not only with the religious groups, it is not only with religious groups. There are other groups really working for this. I think we need to walk extra mile. That's why I said that borderless solidarity, borderless compassion, breaking everything. That kind of a thing needs to be.
So thank you, Bishop. We would appreciate pointed answers because now I see Galaxy ready to speak. Galaxy, are you ready? Galaxy, Reverend Jocelyn, Nana. Yes, Nana, go ahead.
May I
Please
speak?
go ahead. Please
Yeah,
go
thank
ahead,
you.
sir.
Thank you. Bishop, thank you very much for the very, very useful presentation. Every best wishes to you. And this, what is that? Boundless compassion and borderless solidarity. We take it as a model. We take it as a model. And thank you for that. My only, maybe it's a question or a supplement to you, whatever there are two sides of suffering. One is voluntary suffering. The other is forced suffering.
Yeah.
You did not glorify suffering. I am grateful to you because in terms of religious experience, people start to glorify suffering.
No.
Never, ever, we don't glorify suffering, especially the forced suffering of the bonded laborers, the forced suffering of the Dalit people, women, children in the day-to-day experience. Thank you so much for that. And it is a great, eye-opening thing that we have been able to receive it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ghana. I see Reverend Sister Jocelyn, I think, wants to speak. Sister Chaka? Sister Chaka?
I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
Bishop, I have a contemporary issue to place before you. The lockdown. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
The lockdown. The lockdown process has brought us unlimited suffering in many ways. It's not only physical, it's spiritual, and in all round way, it has affected our life. What's your comment about it? Lockdown bringing so much of human suffering to people in a very contemporary way.
We are not able to hear you.
You may ask him to unmute, please. Unmute.
Bishop Sharma Nithiyanandham,
Can
I
you hear
think
me now?
what Bennett.
I'm not able to hear you, Anna.
Yeah.
I'm not able to hear.
So what he has asked is that, we have the lockdown and we are all suffering, and what we need to do this time. Is that?
Yeah, more or less the same.
Yeah.
But the lockdown procedure has brought so much of suffering, all-round suffering, and how do we handle this?
I think, the nature of suffering, it is really challenging us to embrace a kind of a solidarity, You cannot just, sitting somewhere and, talking about all these sufferings. No, it is challenging us to embrace solidarity, especially with those who suffer unduly, For an example, migrants, it is not their mistake, you see. And it is due to unjust system, not properly planned. And the exploitative structures. That is what, creating this suffering. I think we cannot just simply watch and discuss and write, but I have to bring a kind of a embrace solidarity in order to fight against all these things. Otherwise, everything will be, oh, chalega. We will take it easily like that. We must, embrace solidarity.
So that is a good answer, that in order to fight against coronavirus, we all have to be together and have this borderless solidarity.
Yes.
It's a very good insight. And
Yes.
I see the Buddhist leader, but we'll have the last interaction, the last intervention. Anybody who wants to speak, the last intervention.
Bishop, the God has made mankind not to suffer, but to enjoy this world. But the sin came into the world and made suffering. The sin was brought by satanic forces. Satan and God, the big subject. And now, because of the satanic forces, has taken over the worldly thing, and now they are acting actively against God. This suffering is inevitable. It is seen all around the world. And Bible says the last days people will suffer. Suffering is written in Bible. For this, what is your comment, Bishop?
Ravi and ma'am, I think it is very clear in the book of Genesis that it is very clear. The human beings, not God. You said that satanic force, this and that, introduce suffering into the created order through sin, and humanity's collective refusal to honor God. See, here we need to see that the problem is with us. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
We are able to hear you, Bishop.
Yes, go ahead. Bishop Sharma, please.
I think Bishop Sharma lost the connection.
No, he has muted his mic.
Oh.
Bishop Sharma, you have to unmute your mic. Now you talk. Again, it is gone. Bishop.
Okay, then if Bishop Sharma can come in any time, I take this opportunity to thank him. And I see our beloved Buddhist friend already to continue his speech. He has already spoken 5 minutes plus. So keeping that in mind, may I invite, our beloved Buddhist friend, Reverend Lhakdor, to resume his presentation.
Thank you very much. So I have already spoken like 5-10 minutes, but
yes,
as I said, I don't want to overstay no more than 30 minutes.
Very good.
But my friend, the Bishop has really touched on many, many important topics. So what is important is we need to remember all those things and practice it. And we may be more or less saying the same thing, but I really like to put forth some of the important Buddhist perspectives. There is a beautiful quotation in one of Indian Buddhist saint in the 8th century, Shantideva. And in his classic book on ethics, he says that although all sentient beings want happiness, but because of ignorance, we destroy our happiness as if it is our enemy. And we all have this wish to remove and shun suffering, but we always chase suffering. So in this one verse, he very succinctly and clearly highlights the main point, that the suffering that we are experiencing, I think, is not created by Buddha or not created by God. It is because of our negative emotions within ourselves. It is because of our unmatured mental outlook by which we are suffering. As already one of the commentators said, that there is a kind of voluntary suffering or forced suffering. I agree with that. So voluntary suffering means nobody wants to experience suffering, but as I said, we are like small kids, you know. And if you ask the small kids, don't eat too much sweet, they will cry. They want to eat. Then at the end they get headache and their teeth get rotten and they get stomach ache and things like that. We are not so different from those small kids. Forget about negative mental afflictive emotion. Even in terms of taking care of our physical body, we are not so good, including our fathers and bishops and myself. I can say that very safely, you know. Very, very often we are tempted to eat some sweet and some other food that we like without paying much attention about the consequences and effects of that to our body, and we all get sick, right? So therefore the Buddha very clearly said, I can show you the path to liberation. Liberation is up to you. And he said that the enlightened Buddhas do not wash the sins of sentient beings with water, and they do not remove the sufferings of sentient beings with their hands. And the Buddhas cannot transfer their knowledge and realization into the mind of suffering sentient beings. So what can they do? They can only show the path of the truth, path of the suchness. And it's only by realizing the truth, suchness, that we can all get liberated. So my understanding probably is, in the case of Christianity, probably the understanding the truth means understanding the nature of the God. In Buddhism, understanding the truth means understanding the ultimate shunyata or something like that, which basically means ultimate reality. The beauty with this teaching is that when we understand the reality, human beings, the whole world, the countless sentient beings, we are able to see all of this as one cohesive unity, one big circle. I can simplify this by saying that whether you are a human being or a bird or a dog or whatever category of sentient being you are, the one thing that is similar to all of us is that we all want happiness, do not want suffering. We need to remember this simple thing. There's no division. And the Bishop has already mentioned about the beautiful phrase, boundless compassion and borderless solidarity, which is absolutely true. So here we are not even talking about religion. I think this is important because when we are born, we don't have any religion. We came into this world just crying, nothing else, in a very helpless situation. Then we survived because of the love and kindness of one's mother or whoever is taking care of us. So we need to remember this. But unfortunately, sometimes we forget this basic reality and talk about the superficial second layer or third level of which country you belong to, which religion you belong to. For me, this is a little bit going against the ultimate reality. The most important thing is remember that we all want happiness, do not want suffering. Remember that we are not going to live in this world for very long. We are all going to die. Like, for example, in our case, right now, the speakers, I think we are all above 60 or something, you know. So there's not much time, honestly speaking. So what are we going to do? So therefore, the Buddha said, it's very healing and very important to understand, although nobody wants suffering, but when suffering comes, see it as a challenge, see it as an opportunity to grow further, to understand your reality. Because when you don't face these sufferings, when you don't face these challenges, then you lead a pretended life that everything is okay, right? It's only when you get sick, it's only when you experienced the pandemics that we are experiencing such now, that makes you start thinking, what is the meaning of human life? Is it just to consume and go after the material marvels or something more? So here, what I really want to encourage people to think about is that unlike many other species, something that's very unique to human beings is wonderful human, which has the great capacity to many great things, development of compassion, loving kindness, and so forth. But unfortunately, this amazing human intelligence, we have used it in the wrong way. Instead of coming up with a system of education which talks about unity, which talks about love, which talks about compassion, we get this kind of education which is focused only on reading, writing, and mathematics. No human flourishment. And on top of this, we are, bombarded in the medias. Take care of your country alone. Take care of your religion alone. Take care of your society alone. And then finally, not even your society, it's you who is the most important. So therefore, in Buddhism, we say that the root cause of all problem is ignorance. Number one, which is not understanding the reality, the way things are, that we are all interconnected, interrelated. And the second thing is the self-cherishing attitude, where you think only about yourself and completely forget about others and other people, other sentient beings. These two are the real poison that destroys everything. So when the human intelligence is used in the wrong way, as it is happening right now, on the one hand, millions of people are suffering in one way or the other because of the pandemics and so forth, in addition to many problems they already had. While we are experiencing this problem, we have stupid, ignorant, short-sighted leaders who are trying to wage war. Human mind is used for making up destructive nuclear bombs, all kinds of smart weapons. We don't have a proper injection, vaccination to destroy this virus, but we are so smart, so clever. I don't need to elaborate on this. We are completely going in the wrong way, and we glorify this killing. So here, what I really want to, taking this opportunity, I really want to say is that, as Bishop has already mentioned, that in good times and also in bad times, of course, the majority of the people who are suffering are poor people, uneducated people. Why? Not necessarily fault of them, but because whichever country you are living, the leaders, political leaders, or even others who have the power, who can do things, they have no compassion. That's why I'm completely with Father regarding this very important message to have love and compassion for other people. And love and compassion for other people is not just for talking, but living the life, to give proper education, to lend your helping hand, to uplift those people who are in the quagmire of problem. Even in the so-called highly developed countries, there are millions who don't have the supply of electricity, even today. As Bishop has mentioned, that they don't even have proper water to drink. Imagine, shame. It's a big shame. Why it is not there? This can be easily done because the focus is only to self-glorification for that stupid leader and the bunch of people who surround them. Then they hardly go to these poor people and talk to them and they don't need much. Example is just, it hardly take few lakhs of rupees to start a small school, to bring a nalka there, but it is not happening. Year after year, it's not happening. When there is a little bit, rain for 3-4 hours, then all big cities are completely blocked, flooded. Every country, because there's no sense of responsibility for the benefit of other people. Because this monsoon, this flooding happens every year. And if you are somebody who really has this love and compassion, sense of responsibility, you should take care of this much in advance. So there's so many things to be said. So I really want to say is that we need to work in reducing the negative afflictive emotions. Most of the problems, including the pandemics that we are having, is a result of too much greed and too much hatred. Now, if you look at the origin of this virus, either it is because of mishandling with the animals, playing with their life, or it is intentionally made. Whatever, it is done by human beings. It's not done by dogs or tigers or even snakes. They didn't do this. You see, it's really shame, All these other, animals, like even ferocious animals like tigers and lions, they're not creating havoc or big destruction on this planet. Who is bringing this big destruction? Pollution, contamination, environmental degradation. These are done by so-called intelligent human beings. I'm really ashamed of human beings when I think like this. Of course, there are many good things also, but right now I try to highlight the problems that human beings are creating. So therefore, we should really come up with a program of, number one, oneself truly living in accordance with that religious teaching, and as much as possible, create that vibration of a positive education, positive qualities. It will have its impact. And then gradually also we should come up with a way of selecting the right leaders. Because once the power goes in the hand of wrong leader, then unfortunately, as one of the friends said, forced suffering is created on everybody. You see, so many millions of people are suffering because of wrongdoing of few leaders. So therefore, we need to take very special care of our present system of education. But suffering is something that is bound to come, at least from Buddhist viewpoint, so long as we are in the samsara, so long as we are in the cycle of existence, and so long as our life is predominantly controlled by negative emotions and contaminated actions, we are bound to experience one or the other suffering. So when this suffering comes, you need to also realize the fact. Don't see this suffering as completely horrible or negative. I sometimes prefer using the word challenge rather than suffering, because it's only when you face challenges you get an opportunity to develop, to progress. Just like wrestling with a wrestler, when you wrestle with, do wrestling with a wrestler, your opponent is the person with whom you are wrestling is said to be like your opponent. But it's by wrestling with that person that you grow your muscles. So similarly, suffering is also, when seen from the right perspective, it can be very healing. Healing in many sense. One, as I said, it gives you an opportunity to change your life, change your way of thinking, to become more realistic. Another is, according to Buddhism, many of the negative things that you've done in the past life, they are now purified by experiencing this kind of sufferings also. Right? So that is also important. So therefore, in Buddhism, we say suffering is introduction to happiness. It's only when you encounter suffering, you will know what it means to have happiness, to be importance of peace, non-violence, and so forth. And when you experience suffering, then your arrogance comes down, right? And then you are also able to show more love and compassion to other people who suffer, because through your understanding of suffering, you are able to understand other people's suffering. So there are many advantages there. So therefore, according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there are some famous Tibetan Buddhist practitioners who we call as the people who practice the mind training. So these people who undertake this mind training practice, they say that if I'm going to die today, wonderful. Of course, death is one of the biggest suffering. So for this practitioner, they say, if I'm going to die today, it's wonderful, because I am not going to live continuously creating suffering and problem to myself and to others. But don't think they are like pessimistic. Again, they say, if I'm not going to die today, but going to live a long life, wonderful, because then I live and benefit many other people. So if you have the right mental attitude, suffering is okay, happiness is okay. After all, it is a mental projection. Like as the Bishop has already mentioned, the same situation, for some people it is suffering, for some people it is a challenge, opportunity, wonderful, opportunity to get experience. It's not suffering, right? So I'm not saying that we all should have suffering, but suffering is inevitable. In one form or the other form, it will come. But the magnitude of suffering, how much you will experience suffering, is very much dependent upon not just the situation, but how you see it, how you deal with it, right? So therefore, at the end, I don't want to take too long time because it's more important to practice than talk. So if you really want to bring about a long-term change, like taking this experience of this COVID-19 experience, we are right now talking about COVID-19, so forth, because it's a kind of epidemic, pandemic, problem, big problem. But otherwise also, as is said in Buddhism, the birth itself is suffering. Then aging is of course suffering. Then sickness is of course suffering. Then finally death is also suffering, right? And in between, when we talk about illness, there's so many illnesses, especially in the modern day world, because we are destroying the environment. We are not like living harmoniously with other. We go only after the material prosperity. So the more and more we have access to this so-called material prosperity, the more and more we are taken away from our internal positive qualities. So that's why we not only we are suffering, but we are bound to suffer more and more. That's for sure. So what I'm saying is that if you don't want to suffer, or if we don't want to suffer, we need to seriously think about the whole world, the situation of the environment, comparing to the environmental destruction that is happening on a daily, regular basis. This pandemic of course, has created a lot of problems. We all know that. But at least we are now talking, there's some kind of, the plasma, therapy, or,
Vaccine.
Yeah, vaccine might come. So many things can come. But one day when we realize the great destruction that we have done to the environment, and there is a scarcity of water and so forth, what will we do? I can't even think about it. It's so horrible. And we are doing it, that destruction of environment, on a regular daily basis. So there are so many big things that we need to think about. Therefore, my conclusion is, since we call ourselves intelligent human beings, and if from the bottom of your heart, if you really want goodness in the society, in the international arena, in your family, or at least yourself, then the only way to have that long-lasting peace and happiness is to be more united with others. Problem comes because of division in whatever name it is. Inner division within the family, within the religion, within the society, and so forth. So therefore, it is really, really important to use this human intelligence in the right way. So using human intelligence in the right way basically means, according to Buddhism, basically means two things. One, you should have that loving kindness and compassion. And that loving kindness and compassion should be based on knowledge, wisdom, head. I call it combination of head and heart, or wisdom and compassion. This must go together. So that is the solution. In other words, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama repeatedly says, in your life, if you're able to help others as much as you can. And if you cannot help, at least refrain from harming. How many lunatics are there today who are intentionally harming others? exploiting others, cheating others. Extremely sad. This is because there is a shortage of proper education, shortage of proper guidance. So in this connection, it's not only the religious leader, but the religious leaders can play a very important role. So therefore, I'm very happy to participate in this dialogue, in the short presentation with our Christian brothers, because as His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, religious pluralism is extremely, extremely important. And His Holiness always says, if you ask a question, which religion is the best religion? His Holiness says that is stupid question. It is like asking the question, going to the market and saying which medicine is the best medicine. Stupid question. Because that medicine is good for you depending upon your illness. When you ask the question which medicine is best, you cannot decide that in terms of price. If you are having headache, then that medicine which cures your headache is best. So similarly, which religion is best? Stupid question. These different religions are important.
So, beloved Buddhist leader, we
Yes.
are almost covering the time, that is allotted to you.
Yes.
So please may I ask you to come to a conclusion.
Yeah, sure. I will do that right away. So therefore, I'm asking about this religious pluralism. Okay, because there are so many different people with different mental dispositions and needs. One religion cannot fulfill the need of everybody. So religious diversity is important, and we can all contribute towards that better education and happiness of everybody. Thank you.
So on behalf of all our participants, intelligent participants, I wish to thank our beloved Buddhist leader and scholar for speaking from the heart and speaking with passion, speaking with enthusiasm, speaking with compassion, and speaking with solidarity. Thank you, sir. And now may I invite our friends just briefly to make your remarks, pointed and briefly. Minimal, Matthew, Madam Minimal, let us hear some women, Only men have spoken. Actually, men are the main cause of suffering in the world. And
Yes.
they speak more. So please may I invite some women, some sisters of ours.
Yeah. Can I speak?
Of course, go ahead, madam.
Okay. Thank you, Venerable Geshe Lhakdor, for the insightful talk which enlightened us this evening. And especially, we are having the last session of the webinar. You spoke about many things and it really enlightened us, and especially the compassion, love, sympathy, empathy, all those things. Okay, Venerable Geshe, the word compassion, love, sympathy, empathy, these are the words that we usually hear. But how can we bring that? Many people suffer because they are sympathized by others. And could you please give a solution? What quality in us can bring empathy towards others? And one more thing, in the concluding, in the last you said, which religion is the best religion? With that which cure you. Okay, can you explain a little more clearly about that? Thank you so much.
So as I mentioned, briefly speaking,
Hello? Yeah.
So briefly speaking, whether you call it empathy or sympathy or love or compassion, that must be developed through wisdom, understanding the reality. Because, just with the name of compassion, you cannot try to approach everybody. So you need to understand the reality, when to help, how to help, what is the best way to help. So that understanding of the reality of the situation is extremely, extremely important. So that I suppose answers your question. Then what was the second question? The
spoke that which religion
yeah.
is the
So I already said that you cannot answer this because for me Buddhism is best. That does not mean Buddhism is best for everybody. For someone else who is a Christian, Christianity is best, but that does not mean Christianity is best for everybody. So for one individual, one religion is best. But when we talk about everybody, there is no one religion which you can say this is best. So religious pluralism is important.
So thank you very much, our beloved Buddhist friend Lhakdor. Please may I ask for the Charyan or for the Matthew, how long do we go on? Because it is already 8 o'clock.
We can have 10 more minutes, Your Grace.
Okay, not more than 10 minutes because we
Yes.
have our spiritual exercises
Yes.
also.
That
So
would be the,
anybody
yeah.
want to speak?
So, good evening to everyone. I just want to intervene also. Thank you very much, both speakers in a special way. I have to thank Venerable Geshe Lhakdor and also His Grace
Bishop Sharma.
Bishop Sharma Nithiyanandham for the wonderful and inspiring talks they gave. I think we have found out, I just make a compliment to that. That both of the speakers have come to a converging point of speaking that the suffering should lead us to compassion. And that is today's, I think, the message during this pandemic season. I think suffering lead us to compassion, and it lead us to boundless compassion, borderless solidarity. And in a special way, I am, if I say, is it a coincidence or so? Today, the Catholic Church commemorates an Indian saint, the first Indian saint, Sister Alfonsa, who she is as a nun, a sister, coming from from a village in Kerala, Sister Alfonsa, and she has given us a model as a. She is presented herself as a model of suffering, and especially love and suffering, and also suffering leads to compassion. In spite of the suffering she has undergone, she has shown some real compassion to her fellow people. And in that way, today we see that there are many models who took suffering and as a model which they show. And also, I'm very thankful to Bishop Sharma for bringing the concept of cross as a sign of love and suffering. So in that way, our life should, in spite of the ignorance and the self-cherishing mentality that brings suffering, according to our Geshe Lhakdor, who told according to the Buddhist concept, that brings our cause of suffering in our life. In spite of that, we should thrive. We should attempt more and more to overcome this suffering through love, through compassion, through solidarity. And I wish that on behalf of CBCI Commission Office for Dialogue and for Ecumenism, in joining with Father Matthew, I think I must be grateful to this wonderful talk and all these talks for the past 2 months. I am very much thankful to all of participants and also especially to Father Matthew and our dear Bishop Dabre also. I am very grateful to, and both speakers. Thank you very much. And I think this world should be filled with compassion in spite of suffering, filled with solidarity, borderless compassion, and borderless solidarity and boundless compassion. That should be our motto. Thank you very much for hearing me.
So maybe Father Matthew wants to conclude.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, our Buddhist friends, religious leaders, and also from different Christian denominations, and for the 2 months we were all in a pilgrimage, in a journey of togetherness. And yeah, as our Bishop, His Grace Sharma Nithiyanandham was saying that, you know, a boundless compassion and a borderless solidarity. So we were on a pilgrimage. So that was what we were doing, and we were inaugurated by the Archbishop, the chairman of the Dialogue Commission of the CBCI, and also the Tibet House director, Geshe Damdul Dorji. And then there were many other great leaders. And then today we have this wonderful perspectives from Bishop Sharma and Geshe Lhakdor, and moderated by Bishop Dabre. So we heard that, you know, the most important thing is not more talking, but to live the life, and live the life with unity in diversity, and also educate oneself from ignorance towards you know, the wisdom, and joining together the head and the heart. So the compassion, and this compassion and the solidarity which is engulfed all of us. So I take this opportunity to thank the moderator, Right Reverend Dr. Thomas Dabre. You know, we were all having disruptions. And today also we had, because of the technology, we had disruptions. You know, initially Geshe started talking, and then because of the current and then internet problems, switched over to Bishop Sharma, and then later completed by Geshe. So I think this is the beauty of, you know, the switching from one to the other, and that companionship and partnership. So we are all together, we are on pilgrimage, and I thank the Tibet House, CBCI office, and also especially the Secretary, Father Cherian, and all our my colleagues from the ECC, Minlun Sukumar, Reverend Sukumar, and today the great two speakers, Geshe Lhakdor and Bishop Sharma, and also Bishop Thomas Dabre, and all our illustrious participants. We have great people here, and then continuously part of it. And as these leaders have called us, you know, let us work together. This is only the beginning, and we will be on pilgrimage. And not, as Geshe said, whether it is my religion or your religion, but we will be working together hand in hand, all our networking, our head and hearts together for peace and happiness, progress. So thank you very much to everyone. And yes, once again to Bishop Dabre, Geshe Lhakdor, and Bishop Sharma, and all and each one of you. I want to name you, each and everyone, and we will meet again. Next will be the Hindu Christian dialogue. So you are all welcome to participate. We will give you the information, and thank you so much. Good night. We will see again, and we will work together. And when the COVID is gone, we will have this Buddhist Christian dialogue, maybe in Bangalore or elsewhere. So thank you.
In Pune.
In Pune, yes, yes, definitely. Pune will be the heart of India. So definitely we will be coming there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father.
Very much.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you.